Good morning. This is Hammersmith Chess Club Junior Hour, or Junior Hour in 5 minutes or so. This video is the summary of a session we had in the Junior Hour in November 2019. It shows the game between Wilhelm Steinitz and Kurt von Bardeleben during the Congress in Hastings 1895. The Congress was won, very surprisingly, by Harry Pillsbury. It was at that time the strongest tournament ever until that time. And number 3 was the current world champion, Emanuel Lasker. Number 5 was the previous world champion, Wilhelm Steinitz, who in this game was having the white pieces. Wilhelm Steinitz was the first world champion, official world champion, but he had lost his title to Emanuel Lasker. And number 7 of the tournament, and out of 22 players, it shows that the black player, Kurt von Bardeleben, was a strong chess player at that time, even though little known nowadays. Wilhelm Steinitz, as white, was Austrian born. He moved to London after winning the first tournament, his first international tournament, London 1862. Can you believe he won a prize of £5 for winning that tournament? And that was a very strong tournament. And after London, he played many years there. He moved on to the United States, and he was, during this Hastings tournament, already US citizen. Black was Kurt von Bardeleben. He was a very rich German aristocrat, rich enough not to work and just to play chess. And indeed, he was one of the strongest German chess players of that time. Now, the game continued from an Italian opening into this line. And here we stop for a moment. It shows that white has an isolated pawn on d4, which usually is not considered strong. Indeed, it allows black to occupy the blocking square d5. It's a strong square for black, for the knight usually, but can even be taken up by the queen. However, black has not yet castled, and that is will be his doom, because white immediately makes use of that by moving the rook to the open file, and that's typical concept. After the opening, rooks belong to the open files, and indeed this rook move prevents black from to castle. Now, I've mentioned e5, or the e5 would have been a strong square for white. Usually the squares in front, not directly, but diagonally in front of the isolated pawns are strong squares for the attacker. And this was prevented to occupy by f6. White doubles the heavy pieces on the e file, which forces black to retreat the queen to defend the knight on e7. Now the second rook enters the second open file for white, ideal development. And the big mistakes comes. Even though it looks very normal, the mistake which loses the game is c6. c6 in order to prevent white from moving, from pushing the pawn, and to maybe to set up a strong square here. Maybe long castling would be possible, or short castling. Well, at the moment not, but maybe rook going here defending, or king going to f7, then occupying the open lines with the black rooks. But white made use of that move, and he moved his pawn to d5. A very typical move to break open the position. The square is defended 3 times, but actually the knight cannot take because it's pinned. The queen can't take because of the mate e7. So the pawn has to take on d5. And of course, with pushing the pawn from d4 to d5, the square d4 is now available to be occupied by the white knight. And the white knight looks at f5, where it would take a 3rd time, and now undefendable. The black knight, a knight on f5 cannot be taken because of the mate on e7. So black now unpins the knight and is able to defend his knight with a rook. white enters the weak square e6 with his knight and threatens to move his knight to c7. And we know that a rook on the 7th rank is already like a full point. Okay, black can prevent that with moving his knight to the his rook to the open file, so no one dominates the open file. Black continues with a direct attack. It's always, or it's usually the best way to continue with direct attacks. And the attack, of course, is against g7 now. Mate in 2 is the threat. Queen g7. When the king retreats, then it will be queen f8 mate. So g6 prevents the queen going there and prevents also further checks on h5 or the queen going to f5. That allows white to give a check with the knight on g5, and of course the knight cannot be taken because the queen is hanging, and because of that black has to retreat the king to defend his queen. And now comes one of the most beautiful combinations in the chess history, and actually the whole game is one of the most famous games of chess history. White sacrifices his rook or his exchange on h7, but indeed the rook cannot be taken. The queen can't take it because the rook would take on say c8 with check, and white would win the game. If the king takes, then the queen would move to the other side of the board, occupying and giving check on this diagonal. And while there are different continuations, I just show you one continuation where black would be mated or would lose the queen, because now it has indeed to give away the queen in order to avoid mate. So after rook e7, the rook cannot be taken. The king has to go away. It can't go to d8 because it will be mate on d7. So it goes to f8. Now what can white do? I mean, the most obvious would be, why not take the queen on d7? It's not defended. It can be taken either by the rook or by the queen g8, g4. But then let's just see what happens. Rook c8. And even though it is not an immediate mate, but then rook e1 would be. So white has to be very careful. Black threatens indeed a ground rank mate himself, and white has no way to escape his king. So at the moment, there is this rook attacked by black, that rook attacked by black, and the queen attacked. And there is no way to defend all three with one queen or one rook move without losing one of the other heavy pieces. But white found a nice way. He checked on f7. Again, the queen can't take because of rook c8. The rook has to, the black king has to go away to g8. Same problem for white. Same solution. Rook continues its way, checking on the 7th rank. Same problem for black, same continuation. If black takes, let's now assume he takes with the king on g7. There are different possibilities. There is a check on d7. And if black takes with a queen, then of course it will be rook c8. So again, black has to continue his path with the king to h8. And same problem for white. Same solution, rook takes on h7. Now, there is no I line, so indeed black has no choice than going back. What can white do now? Again, same problem, but same solution, going back to g7. Check on the 7th rank. And now there are two possibilities for black. Black could go to f8, and there is a different way to win the game for white, because it can check on h7, and then the queen will be lost with a check of white. So indeed here, it's not advisable to go to f8. The king would have to go to h8. And I should indeed mention that at this at this time, black, actually he didn't resign. He left the tournament hall and did not return. So after some time, Wilhelm Steinitz was declared winner. Because Kurt von Bardeleben was a strong player, he knew that he would be mated within a few moves. Well, Wilhelm Steinitz had to explain to the audience how he would have mated black, and that's what he showed then. King h8, now queen h4, the king has to take now. h7 check, king f8, and there's a sequence of checks, and the black king is forced to ever worse locations, and there will be a very nice mate in the middle of the board. So this would have been the end of the game. We have seen one of the most beautiful games of chess history. Kurt von Bardeleben was strong enough to see that he would be mated in such a way, but he was a bad loser. He didn't allow Wilhelm Steinitz to show it on the board, and he didn't shake hands. So he was really a bad loser. And I hope we will never be such, even if losing.